Talk to us about your exhibition. You're going to be exhibiting soon in Sri Lanka.
It was slightly scary to be having a cancer diagnosis in the middle of the pandemic. If it was possible, my choice was to be treated, at the government hospital. And it was an eye-opener in many ways. It was a big learning. And so one of the things I did was to make a decision to do something, to be able to facilitate, the good work they do, make it even better. And so I reached out to, numerous artists. In the end, now we have a group of 23. And the plan is to mount an exhibition, and proceeds from the sale of all the artworks go towards the benefit of the hospital. Being an artist is difficult. It's not easy, but I would say don't sell out and don't copy anybody else. Follow your own dream, your own head, your own thoughts, make up your own mind about things, have an opinion.
Welcome to this special episode of The Canvas. I'm Azhar Carrim, and today I have with me a very special guest. She's an experimental filmmaker, an artist, a teacher, and she has also survived cancer twice. I have with me Mariah Lookman. How are you doing, Mariah?
Thanks for having me here.
No worries. So thank you, Mariah, for coming on this show. Mariah, tell us about your journey. First of all, tell us what brought you to Sri Lanka.
Love brought me to Sri Lanka, you could say that. So my husband is Sri Lankan, and we were married in 2003. And since then, especially since then onward, Sri Lanka has been home in one way or the other. But aside from my husband, my grandmother's sister was married to a Sri Lankan man. My father's sister is married to a Sri Lankan man. And, my cousin is married to a Sri Lankan man. So I guess, there is something here that brings us.
Definitely, and that's a very interesting history you have. Now, Mariah, just talk to us about, first of all, let's talk about your battle with cancer. Just talk to us about that journey, if you don't mind sharing it with the viewers.
Okay, so the first time when I was diagnosed with cancer, I was quite young. I was in my early 30s. It came as a shock. I didn't feel ill. I just felt something, and all my results and tests were negative, but, finally things were not too good. But I think since then, that was 15 years ago, I think I've had my attitude is different. I think one of the biggest problems is the combative language. I think there's too much aggression, and I think when you're aggressive in your attitude towards even your own body, and including the kinds of words you use, battle, fight, survivorship, all these words come from, they have a military root and a background. And I think if you have a mindset change and you sort of think of language of kindness, balance, focus, healing, I think that's the way to go.
So I just want to ask you, did it help you in being more sensitive, or are you saying people should be more sensitive towards a person who's, let's say, having a fight such as this?
I think to care for others, to be empathetic, really helps the person who is actually undergoing being ill and undergoing treatment and struggling, because the side effects of the treatment can be quite harsh. But on the flip side, we all need to be kinder to our body. So find time for yourself, eat better, exercise, meditate, and make better choices in terms of eat healthier food, less stress, spend time in nature, and I mean things like that.
Definitely. Now, you're an artist, and artists usually try to take something that has happened to their life, whether it's a negative event or a positive event, and try to showcase it in their art. Have you showcased the struggles or this journey you have had with, you probably faced a lot, I can say, mentally, physically and all. So have you showcased this in your art?
That's a good question, because, the first time, right after I finished, one of my best friends who used to be my first roommate while I was doing my undergraduate degree. She said, "What were you going to do? What were you going to do, if you were not, going through treatment?" And I said, "Well, I was going to go do my PhD." And she said, "So what's stopping you?" And I was in London at that time. And she said, "Come, I'm doing some research. Why don't you start working with me?" And at the end of 5, 6 months, I had a PhD research proposal. I submitted all the applications. I got accepted. And then I had made a condition for myself that, one doesn't really pay to do a PhD. So unless you get a scholarship and you get fully funded PhD, only then you're smart enough to do one. So I got that wish too. That happened. And the focus of my PhD was on the intersection of science and, art, body, and the medical body versus the body and the way the body is represented in art. So if you even think of an artist like Leonardo,
Yeah.
you look at the anatomical drawings, so there's sort of a close connection between how we visualize the body. One is for medicine, the other one is doing something else.
So now, Maria, do you have any specific art style? Because you're also an experimental filmmaker, and that's the thing about artists. We like to, do a lot of different things in terms of, showcasing our creativity. So now, talk to us. Do you have any specific art style? It doesn't only have to be, obviously, doesn't have to be a painting or drawing, because when you have a vision, you have a different type of sense of what you want. So what is your style, or what is your just talk to us about what goes on in your head.
As an experimental filmmaker, as you yourself who work in media, you realize we are surrounded by images, we're surrounded by videos, we're surrounded by moving images. And so even though I'm trained, I started my education as an artist by training as a painter. I moved to photography and then I moved to film, but then I also learned how to make film using proper old style film, and how you would cut and splice and stitch things together. And that made me open my eyes to the whole world of experimental filmmaking, and how you could actually it's possible to make a film without a lens. It's possible to make a film without holding the camera yourself. There's so much found material. So I like using found footage. I like using other people's material. I'm not saying I don't like shooting my own, but I'm a bit of a magpie. If someone has already done it and if it's good, I'm not going to bother wasting my resources. But I use it. I re-edit, refine, recompose it. So you could call them video collages almost.
It's a very interesting topic, like what you just mentioned. So how'd you get into that? Why that specific topic?
I think because I did not have a camera of my own then. And, 20 years ago, if you think about it, people had video cameras, but editing suites were, you had to book, you had to reserve, you had to sit with people. So I did my first experimental film probably 1996, 95, 96. And I remember it was in Lahore. And I remember, video kind of tapes, and then you had to take it and you had to book time and then you sit with somebody or an edit suite and then you sort of go over things. And you can do those things, but, you require a bit of budget and planning. So if you're doing an experimental film, the viability is limited. And so I suppose having that lack, I decide to innovate.
What's one of the worst things you have heard as an artist? Anything that has annoyed you, or someone has said who is not an artist, or maybe also is an artist which has triggered you or annoyed you?
Not annoyed. You learn things from comments, and they might, be upsetting, or one might find them a bit annoying. But if you hear carefully, there is something in there for you. So I think one of my most insightful comments was coming from a younger artist, and she came and said, "Oh yeah, I can understand why your work is liked because it looks very European, right?" And I was just like, so I thought that was really annoying. But there was a point. And so you hear things and things can be annoying, but it if it helps you look at yourself more critically, right? So then all the difficult comments are actually a gift.
Even the ones that might not make sense.
Now, those things you can't pay attention to, because if you do, then you just waste a lot of your own time.
Definitely,
Right.
I agree. So now talk to us about your exhibition. You're going to be exhibiting soon in Sri Lanka. Talk to us more about that. Like, what can we expect?
So a part of my practice involves curatorial work as well. Okay, and by curatorial work, I don't mean sort of as a professional curator, who would be at a museum, say, but as a kind of a practice as an artist. And this time round, when I fell ill, one of the things I made a decision for myself was, it was during COVID, and we were under lockdown. It was slightly scary to be having a cancer diagnosis in the middle of the pandemic. So the advice I got from, very wise doctors was, don't travel, stay in Gaul. And I opted to go to my local hospital, which is Karapitiam. I got to know the doctors there, and I chose, if it was possible, my choice was to be treated, at the government hospital. And it was an eye-opener in many ways. It was a big learning process for me in ways that I was not really thinking only about myself. And so one of the things I did was to make a decision to do something, to be able to facilitate, the good work they do, make it even better. And so you think, okay, what does an artist do? What do you do? And I said, well, I can't do much, but I know, the scope of my professional experience. And so I reached out to, numerous artists. In the end, now we have a group of 23. There are artists who I worked with previously, who I have taught, who have taught me. So it's an intergenerational, sort of a group. They're colleagues from Pakistan, they're colleagues, friends from the United Kingdom, from the US. There are even some friends of, classmates and old artist friends of my husband. So we are together in this. So I just called them and I said, I'm thinking of doing a fundraiser. Will you give a work of art? And, most people said yes, and they've given generously. And so the plan is, we have almost 70 pieces. And the plan is to mount an exhibition, and proceeds from the sale of all the artworks go towards the benefit of the hospital in Gaur.
Wow, that's a really great initiative, honestly. And I hope the best for that initiative and that it goes well.
Thank you.
So now, Maria, I did a bit of research on you. Why is it that you don't want to showcase your own art in your own exhibitions?
I think when you're wearing a different kind of hat, which is like a curatorial hat, say, for example, then it's a little bit messy, because I feel my focus should be on the work of the other artist, because that's my responsibility to make sure that looks good, that has a kind of a presence, it connects with the other works in the exhibition, if it's a group exhibition. If you bring yourself in that, it is difficult to wear two hats at the same time. And for myself, I find it uncomfortable.
So objectively, you want to focus on one thing at a time. You don't want to have any distractions with that goal.
True. I mean, I do multiple things, so when you're teaching, So I might be doing multiple projects at the same time. But, when I'm looking at one thing, then it's just that thing. Because otherwise, I can't do justice to anything.
Definitely. Now, Maria, you're a Pakistani. Do you miss Pakistan? And what do you miss about Pakistan?
I do, of course, I miss Pakistan, but I've been lucky. The proximity from Sri Lanka to Pakistan is not that much. And I've continued to work in Pakistan for all the time, no matter where I'm in the world. So I have, been fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to do projects, to show, to teach. So my connection is not lost. So in that sense, I don't feel like I miss, but I do miss, especially, in terms of fruit. I think we have a great variety of fruit. Mangoes to guavas to pomegranate to peaches. Our range is quite wide. The only thing we don't have is pineapple. So I'm happy that I can get that here.
We have a lot of pineapples. So now you also told you were a teacher. Talk to us about tell us what's your favorite experience as a teacher?
I think the best part about teaching is learning yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my favorite age group is probably 21 to 31.
Mm-hmm.
The
young adults.
Young adults, a lot of questions, ability to work hard, but a lot of inquisitiveness. And some people might find it challenging, but that's the kind of age group I like working with. And so I've been lucky that I've been able to do that, at university level. And therefore, you just learn. You're always learning. You're always learning something from them as you're teaching, because teaching is not a one-way process, right? It's about listening. It's about adapting, and it also makes you relearn things you thought you knew, right? So it keeps you on your toes a little bit. I think the best part about teaching is that you're constantly questioned and challenged.
So Maria, you have traveled around the world. What is your most interesting artistic experience from traveling around the world?
I have been lucky. I've had the opportunity to see a lot of incredible work in museums, in artist studios. But I think more than seeing a work in a museum, my conversations with artists are more special. And I think, when I was a young student, one of my professors had introduced me to the work of this South African filmmaker. He's an experimental filmmaker as well. He makes animated films. His name is William Kentridge. And I was a fan of his for a very long time. And then while I was, doing my graduate work, William Kentridge happened to be at my university as an invited professor. And then I was one of those students who was picked to have sort of half a day tutorial and hang out with and show my work. And I think maybe that was good. That was fun.
Lovely. Now I want you to give the audience, to those watching, you're an artist yourself, any words of advice for them?
Being an artist is difficult. It's not easy. But I would say don't sell out and don't copy anybody else. Follow your own dream, your own head, your own thoughts. Make up your own mind about things. Have an opinion.
Maria, we are now coming to the end of this show. Anything you'd like to say to those watching that can learn from your journey?
I would say don't be afraid. So if you're feeling unwell, especially for young women, if you feel like a lump, go test it. There's a high chance it's nothing. But in case it is malignant, the earlier it's detected, the more treatable it is. Cancer does not have to be, as terrible an incident as, it has bigger space in our imagination. And if you give it less space and a less scary space in our imagination, then, it is easier to deal with. So in case anyone is feeling a little bit unwell, check it out, treat it, nip it in the bud, and be done with it. I think that's I would say that's the takeaway from, my journey as a cancer patient.
Thank you, Maria, for coming to this show. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.